running because I believe that I have the experience it'll take to be ready on day one to serve this district. I have background at the local level on planning board and select boards, at the regional level on Old Colony Planning Council and the Plymouth County Advisory Board and a steering committee on the Indian Head River. I have experience at the state level, having worked this past year as a staffer on the Joint Committee for Labor and Workforce Development. I think that gives me a background. I also have private attorney experience, business experience, and I went back to get my master's in social work along the way. So I think that that breadth of experience allows me to handle a wide range of issues that come up before the state legislature and that impact directly our district. So let me tell you a little bit about how I got here and who I am. I actually grew up in New Orleans. And I was one of those kids who signed up for every service project you could imagine, whether it was Youth Arc and running programs. Back in the 70s and early 80s, kids were just coming. The sort of deinstitutionalization movement was starting among people with developmental disabilities. We were working on CYO, we were serving in soup kitchens, we were tutoring Cambodian refugees, you name it, we were trying to do it. And that was sort of how I grew up and what I did. Went to college, worked on the college paper, Committee for Peace with Justice in Central America. Then I went to law school and worked on the Review of Law and Social Change. I was editor of the Review of Law and Social Change, and doing a lot of great work. And then I get out of law school and I go to big law in New York City. And I'm working in the corporate world. Yes, I still bring the program I had for working with battered women into our pro bono program, but I'm in the corporate world. And I leave there to go to a satellite communications company and help to build the first private international satellite communications company. And I was part of a team. There were 185 of us at that point who helped to build this company. And it was exciting. I was going around the world negotiating big deals and getting access to markets in different places and opening up communications. But at some point, I'm telling my executive vice president, I went to law school to save the world. And it turns out I'm making the world safe for MTV. MTV was the most popular out there. And so I realized I really wanted to find a way to build a life that was based on community and family and service. And so I stepped back and I kept working for the company's outside counsel as I tried to figure this out. I met my husband, who grew up in Braintree, and everyone knows that anyone who grows up in the South Shore never leaves. So this became my home.
The men don't leave. No. Yeah.
The men don't leave, the women do. I don't know, a lot of people I know who are women have been here forever. And so we moved down to Hanson, and that became the start of me building community and service. Got involved with the Cable TV Committee at a time when Comcast was getting out of public access, and we needed to stand up the Women Hanson Cable Access TV Corp. I got elected to the Hanson Select Board. We were looking at Monpont Pond committees. I went back to get my master's in social work from Bridgewater, and then I found that the family piece wasn't coming as easily as I had hoped. And so I stepped back and took a few years. The next year I had my son and took a couple years with him. And then I opened up my shingle and started to practice law again. And at that point, I was doing some work with a coastal engineering firm down in Louisiana, remotely. We did work on looking at the loss of the Delta, the Mississippi Delta. We were looking at post-disaster recovery work in Texas and New York after Hurricane Sandy and other places. And it was really interesting. That company we then sold. I was a part owner. We sold the company and moved on. At the meantime, I became involved in local government again. Volunteered and ran for the planning board in Pembroke. Served on the planning board for Matthew, could probably tell me 5 or 6 years, and chaired that for a couple of years. And then I ran for the select board in Pembroke and served there for 3 years. And got involved with the Old Colony Planning Council through the planning board and the select board, and I currently serve as president of the Old Colony Planning Council. I continued that after I left. And after I left, I went to work at the State House in the Joint Committee for Labor and Workforce Development, where we have basically come to look at all of the labor bills that are in the legislature, come through that committee, and our job is to make sure that every bill gets heard, and we're working with the advocates, and we're working with the people who are opposing it, and trying to find out what can actually get passed. So it gave me an insight into the legislature. One thing I found, though, is you get all of these emails when you're a staffer. And these emails tell you about all these great programs, all of this great programming on mental health and coastal issues and all these other issues, but that wasn't my job. And the one thing I love about the job of state rep, and I've worked with Josh for many years, he was my law partner for years, he was my boss at the State House, and one of the things I've loved about the work he gets to do is he gets to connect those dots with the community. He gets to help constituents with state government, but he also got to look at every different area and said, oh, this is the person who needs this email. This is the person who needs to work on that program. Because part of what you're doing is serving constituents, serving all of the communities, and you're trying to get legislation passed, but you're also trying to connect people to the advocacy and the work that they can do at the State House. So when he said that he was going to take this job in the administration, and was I going to run, I looked at it and thought about it for a few minutes and said, you know, I really love this district. I've lived in this district for 20 years. I've lived, worked, raised my son, who's now almost 17, in this district. And Hanson and Pembroke are the two towns I've lived in. But I've spent a lot of time, I spent 10 years at Road to Responsibility on their Human Rights Committee, right down the road for part of that time that we met in Hingham. I spent time in all of these communities, I know them well, and I think I'm ready to serve. The issues that I see that are confronting us right now that are kind of top of my mind are housing. You know, our kids can't afford to live here. Our seniors, I think we have this bottleneck right now because seniors that I talk to frequently don't have the resources or the income to move outside of their home. They don't have another place to move to that's going to be less expensive than where they're living now, and that's going to make sense for them. So they stay where they are, and that means that housing is not available to younger families to move in. We also have the need for workforce housing. You know, when we talk about affordable housing, people don't always realize that affordable around here means that a family of three makes somewhere around $90,000 a year. Because in order to afford that affordable housing, you have to come close to the cap in order to actually afford it. That's not nothing. I mean, those are good, those are decent jobs. So we need to work on housing. We need to work on housing in a way that doesn't change the character of our communities. We need to try to generate more ideas at the local level and filter them up and not just have them come down to us. Second issue is economic development, and it ties into housing because it's very difficult to have economic development if your workforce can't afford to live there. Road to Responsibility has something like 40% of its jobs open. People with developmental disabilities, there aren't enough programs right now as people age out of programs. So when we talk about economic development, we need to also talk about workforce, we need to talk about jobs, we need to talk about paying living wages. Because that's the key to being able to have economic development, is to have a skilled workforce in the areas you need it. Our tradespeople are aging out. We need more apprenticeship, vocational ed, workforce development. That's actually what Josh is going to work on in the Labor Department. So these all kind of pull together. At Old Colony Planning Council, we were able to get a grant from the Economic Development Agency at the federal level, a grant from the state, and some money from the South Shore Chamber of all places to conduct a water study that looks at the whole region and says, if we're going to put any more housing or development down here, where's our water coming from? How are we sharing water resources in a way that doesn't impact the environment negatively? Which brings me to my third issue, which is coastal resiliency and environmental issues that come with global warming. We have these tremendous resources. We're a district that has beaches and coastline that is flooding. We have inland ponds, we have rivers, we have Burridge Pond over in Hanson that people almost never know about. That's under wildlife management. We live on a pond in Pembroke that has probably 5 recreational ponds and trails that are tremendous. So the question is, what do we do in the face of global warming, weather patterns that are getting more extreme, to protect our communities and protect that open space at the same time we're doing economic development and housing. A lot of pieces. I'm not running to sort of be the be-all and end-all to fix all of this. Like with the satellite company, I want to be part of a team. I want to be your advocate on that team, to say this is our district, this is what we care about. I want to listen more and bring that back to the State House and be there to represent you. My son a few years back said that growing up in Pembroke was like growing up in a campground. He had all these trails he could go down, there was the pond, there was the basketball courts, and he was pretty free to just roam, you know, and he loved it. And I want that to be true for our grandkids, for my grandkids. And I'm hoping we can do that by making stronger communities. And when we think this week about something like mental health, and the Elmo story that everyone probably heard, building strong communities, building safe spaces, keeping places for kids to play and roam, that's part of building stronger youth, stronger communities. And that's at the core of addressing these kind of issues. So I'm hoping that I get to know all of you that I don't know already. Maybe I can get Kathy over there to go back out with me and learn some more rowing skills. And we can do a lot of fun things and a lot of good for our district. So I hope that you will support me. Check me out at BeckyColetta.com. I'm on Facebook, Becky Coletta for State Rep, and could use your support in every way possible. So thank you. Thank you.